In Aion, Jung gives a description of the self and its relationship to consciousness. He writes, "The self is a true complexio oppositorum, though this does not mean that it is anything like as contradictory in itself. It is quite possible that the seeming paradox is nothing but a reflection of the enantiodromian changes of the conscious attitude, which can have a favorable or an unfavorable effect on the whole. The same is true of the unconscious in general, for its frightening figures may be called forth by the fear which the conscious mind has of the unconscious. The importance of consciousness should not be underrated. Hence, it is advisable to relate the contradictory manifestations of the unconscious causally to the conscious attitude, at least in some degree." Edward Edinger simplifies what Jung said by using a term called the reciprocality principle. He says, "The word reciprocal is used here as it is used in mathematics. In mathematics, we know that every number is reciprocal. The reciprocal of 2 by 3 is 3 by 2. The reciprocal of 5 is 1 by 5. To find the reciprocal, one has to turn a whole number into a fraction or into a fractional notation at least. In other words, into a double term. Reciprocality can exist only when two terms exist. When one multiplies two reciprocals, the product is always 1. I think that is psychologically significant. The psychological reciprocality principle is that the unconscious responds inversely to the conscious ego. The ego's relation to any particular psychological quality or content can be expressed in a fractional term, and then accordingly to the reciprocality principle, the unconscious manifestation of that quality will be a reciprocal of the conscious manifestation. For example, let us say we are dealing with the quality of aggressiveness on a scale of 10. At 0, one would be a total victim, a total quivering, knee-shaking, fleeing victim. At the other end of the scale, one would be a total aggressor, chasing, attacking. Now let us say that our particular ego is very much in the victim realm, with an aggressiveness fraction of only 2 by 10. By the reciprocality principle then, the unconscious will have an aggressiveness fraction of 10 by 2. In other words, if the ego is very much identified with being the victim, the unconscious will have the aggressor constellated in it and will start chasing the ego. The principle holds true not only within the individual, but in the individual's relationship with the environment. For instance, if a speaker behaves like a weak, fearful victim at the podium, it will not be long before the whole audience will be after him. Jung discusses another aspect of the relationship between conscious and the unconscious. Between the conscious and the unconscious, there is a kind of uncertainty relationship because the observer is inseparable from the observed and always disturbs it by the act of observation. In other words, exact observation of the unconscious prejudices observation of the conscious and vice versa. Jung's term uncertainty relationship refers to the uncertainty principle of nuclear physics that was first formulated by Werner Heisenberg. This principle states that the position of velocity of a subatomic object cannot both be precisely measured at the same time. Any attempt to measure precisely the velocity of a subatomic particle, such as an electron, knocks it about in an unpredictable way. Likewise, observing it also changes its position. If its position is measured, then its velocity is altered. The very act of observation of subatomic particles alters their condition so that exact objective readings are impossible. More generally, the principle indicates that an observer is drawn into the data being observed and influences it in an unavoidable way. Precisely the same state of affairs occurs in observation of the unconscious. The unconscious is altered by the process of observation. This means that there is no such thing as an absolutely objective piece of psychological data from the unconscious, because in order to have observed it, the observer has seen it. touched it and brought it back. In the process of doing all this, one has put one's fingerprints on it. The reverse is also true. Both the observer and the observed influence each other. Not only does the ego influence the unconscious when it observes it, but also the unconscious, the self, modifies the ego that is observing it. There is an eye of God aspect of the self which observes the ego, just as the ego, when it reaches a certain level, can observe and affect the self.